Ipswich Election Watch 2020 with Alan Roebuck.
This podcast acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which it is produced and pays respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to episode 2 on close of nominations day, and what a day, with the main headline being former Division 2 councillor attempts to rise from the ashes of being sacked and run again. Will this Phoenix-like attempt be successful? Ipswich Election Watch offers this opinion. With the election less than 4 weeks away, the electorate is still to fully engage with the fact they'll be voting for a mayor and 2 councillors each division on March 28. The profile generally of all candidates is still low. It is why familiar names on the ballot paper will undoubtedly have an advantage. I say this despite former councillors being sacked and names being dragged through the mud. And what about the alleged missing millions from Ipswich City properties? The fact is multiple audits, including by the Queensland Audit Office and other reports, do not reveal anything missing. What they do reveal is a not insignificant trading loss on the former council-owned Ipswich City properties. There are relatively few people who understand this crucial detail. It's a moot point that former councillors, as directors of ICP, were possibly not the ideal choice to run a multi-million-dollar property portfolio. It is also fact that under 2 interim administrators, things are finally happening in the CBD. Major hurdles have been cleared and it's all systems go on the construction front. It has filled the city with some hope that the worst of the saga, which began with the building of the Icon Tower over 10 years ago, is behind us. There are several other council-owned CBD properties being redeveloped, which council should ultimately sell, and hopefully recoup some, maybe all, of that $78 million loss. How much will the CBD redevelopment influence voters on election day? We'll find out on the evening of March 28. My first guest today is local CBD business owner Steve Mallet. I started by asking Steve what he was hearing on the street from the public about the election.
I think for the first time in many years, it's very important for everyone to pay a lot of attention. Like they all want to be involved. I think there's a lot of inquiries at the coffee shop talks and all the basically customers coming into our stores. We talk a lot about what they think they need to have changed and who they think can come in and do the right job. But like previous years, I think a lot of people were up in the air about who they should vote for and didn't really care. But we are noticing a lot more people really getting involved and wanting to have a bit of a say in who this whole new council should be. And I think they're all ready for a fresh start.
Well, on that note, do you think voters are getting enough information to make an informed decision?
Not yet. I think we will start seeing some. Like a lot of the candidates have sort of kept their cards very close to their chest, I think, for the last 4 or 5 weeks. But I think we need to have a lot more said. But the forums we've got out there now, which are really good, we've never done before. In the local community areas, you have nights with the candidates, and Ipswich City Council has a lot more on their website. I think we're definitely doing a lot more in those areas than we've done with any election before, which is a good thing.
And I'd be happy to add the Queensland Times to the top of that list, Steve. I think editor Shannon Newley is right on top of it, and those forums will either be well attended or well watched online.
Yes, a great list out today, in today's QT actually, with a number of the candidates doing interviews, and I think we definitely need more of that every day, and right through to the election, and everybody getting a better idea on what each individual stands for and making sure they choose the best of the city. And
what are the local issues that people are talking about up to now?
A lot of things have been left on the shelf for the last 20 years, really, is, everyone wants to see a vibrant CBD. They really do. They want to see it, and it's been promised for 20 years, and they still have never delivered. And to make that happen, some of the big areas are the infrastructure, transport infrastructure, public transport into our city and out of our city to all areas. Basically roads. Biggest issue really is roads in my mind personally. I don't think our CBD streets or our inroads are going to be able to stand up to the population growth we've got. Just minor things like the second bridge. It's been going for 30 years, still haven't got one. It's at a point where our infrastructure can't cope. So I think those areas are big issues people are talking about. The development of the mall is very positive. It's been positive for the last 2 years while Greg and his team have put it all together. I think the small opening we've got, the first stage was shown last Saturday night with the food vans. Was a very positive with numbers, and we just need to keep going forward and keep making that happen for the next 10 years, forever, and then get proper professional businesses in that mall, running out of the offices, putting feet on the ground, and supporting the local businesses that run in our CBD to bring more business, and that will flow to the outskirts of our city and all the way down to Springfield, from Marburg to Ripley.
Steve, you've focused in heavily there on the CBD, and it is very important to get that city heart beating again. But looking at the wider issues out there, right across the city, are there any other that come to mind?
Local community support has always been a big positive for Ipswich. We are a very loyal city. We are very strong in that area. So I think our community support has to come within ourselves. A lot of the local businesses, that area is something we always need, and so I think it's something we're very strong at producing ourselves. So we don't really need the council to do it, but we just need to make sure the new council supports it. Make sure the new council unite as one.
And finally, how do you read the priorities of a new council? So if you were amongst that first group to sit down and have their first full council meeting, what do you think should be on the agenda?
Probably the first thing I think they need to do is sit down and work out how they can all bring their detailed needs for their divisions to the table, and how they can all settle on an outcome of prioritisation. So put a master plan in place of all these activities that need to be achieved, prioritise the most important down to the least important, and leave that meeting as a unity of one, and basically achieve each goal and then move on to the next. Because I just think we have always had too many things in there that need to be done, and nothing ever all we did was debate. We don't need debate. We don't need coloured hats saying which they think is more important. We need 8 people shared with the mayor, and then basically uniting together as one to accomplish results. And that's what I believe is their priority. They should go in their first meeting and work out how they are going to unite as one and achieve the benefits to fulfil the members of the Ipswich community.
Steve Mallet, really appreciate your time and your thoughts on Ipswich Election Watch.
Thank you very much.
Deciding who to vote for at an election can be a daunting task. Well, my next guest on Ipswich Election Watch should be able to help you decide who to vote for. I'd like you to meet Shane Mallory, who's a professional speaking coach, speaker and MC. Thanks for joining Ipswich Election Watch, Shane.
No, thanks for having me, Alan.
It's true. We don't get to know candidates personally because it's just not feasible. And we often decide on how they look or how they sound. What do you think candidates need to work on, and probably very quickly, for them to let us see the real them?
Well, for me, whenever I go into any type of speech coaching exercise with any of my clients, the first thing that I talk to them about is them and their stories. And I see that everything emanates from story, because it's what we live by. It's what, when we were kids and, if mum and dad were reading us a story, we couldn't wait for bedtime so we could hear that story. It's how cultures develop over time. Like, our first peoples, their history is story. So for me, when I go in and work with people, the first thing I talk about is getting clear on what your story is. Now, that can be a little bit of a backstory about you, or the story that you see for the future of Ipswich, or the story that you see in the next 12 months. But having that story and having that story set in concrete, if you like, is, in my opinion, one of the surefire ways of making sure that you will draw your audience in, you will get them interested to the ideas, the concepts, and the policies that you want to get across, because we all are suckers for a story.
Indeed, we are.
Yes.
What about leaders? How do you decide who is a good leader just by listening to them speak?
There's a phrase that I go by, and this is my history, I suppose. If anyone would check my website out, I was a police officer for 26 years, and after that I went into IT, and I've always been in leadership positions, if you like. And a very wise person once said to me, to be a leader, even if you're the only one in the team. Now, that basically means that if you don't have your own stuff together and your own things sorted out, there's no point in trying and lead anyone else. So it's about having your priorities in the right place. It's about having, like I said, your stories sorted out so that people can see that you are consistent, that you have a strong message, and it's a message that people want to follow. Leaders who react are not as good as leaders who respond.
What are the main pitfalls that the traps people fall into who are not experienced at public speaking?
So one of the first things that traps people will fall into is that they feel as though whenever they get up onto a stage, they have to give everyone their resume. That may be the case in very, very few circumstances, but if you can draw people in with the story that you want to tell them, your resume will come through in that story. And you don't need to tell them that, hi, I'm Shane Mallory, I've lived in Ipswich for more than 30 years and da. It can be something as simple as, I remember taking my kids to school in the early 90s. And straight away, I've told everyone that, or taking my kids to school in Ipswich in the early 90s, I've told everyone that I must have been in Ipswich for a long time if I'm taking my kids to school in Ipswich. When we can not treat our audience as mugs and realize that if we put that information into a format that will entice them to listen, then there's a greater chance of them actually going away from the session or the forum that they're dealing with, having remembered a whole lot more than if they were simply providing them with essentially facts and figures, which is what a resume is. If you wind things up in a story and people remember it. I sometimes do presentations to schools and things like that, and about leadership and those sort of things. But it's when the kids come away from those sort of things, or if I'm talking in an adult group, they'll remember my stories. So long as my message is in the story, my job is done.
Often in public speaking, Shane, inexperienced people will draw on cliches. And one of the ones I dislike the most is, in this space. Are there any cliches that particularly the candidate should avoid?
Oh, look, it's that inappropriate bingo game, isn't it, that you play when you sit down and try and work out just how many cliches people say. Yeah, in this space, at the end of the day, one of the classics that people will do is they'll get asked a question, and if they don't want to answer that question, they'll say, I can't tell you that, but what I can tell you is this. That's a cliche that I think they should probably avoid as well. So any of those ones, I mean, as we said, there's an absolute plethora of them that we could tap into. But my pet hate is, at the end of the day, that one.
Well worn out, that one. We're getting to the pointy end of the campaign. It's now going to be
there we go.
There's a cliche for
end.
You. Yes, the pointy end. Now, there are a lot of candidates are obviously inexperienced, well-meaning, heart in the right place. Are there 3 tips you could give a budding candidate on how to deliver a powerful message and make it crisp and so people understand it?
All right. Well, how about if I'll go one step better and I'll go give them 4. This is a little acronym that I teach that I call Keeping It Real. And it's all about our brain chemicals. So the first one is to remember. So anything that you do and any talk that you give or any meeting that you have with people, give them an opportunity to remember. Because when people remember, they release serotonin in their brain. Now, serotonin is a mood-based chemical that will actually lift someone's mood, or it can actually drop someone's mood. But if you enable people to remember times when things were good, that will release serotonin. So get people to remember. The next one is to empathize. So, and when you empathize with people, and I'm not talking about sympathizing, I'm talking about empathizing here. When you understand where they're coming from, when you've had an opportunity to, and I'm going to use a cliche here, walk a mile in someone else's shoes, you get the opportunity to empathize with them. And empathizing releases the brain chemical oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is also known as the love drug or the really feel-good drug. So when you empathize with someone, you will connect with them on a level that makes them feel good. So if they're remembering, they're empathizing, and you've got them working well there. The fourth one is to anticipate. Always make sure that when you're talking with people that you are giving them something that they can anticipate. Because if they can anticipate something, then that's going to release dopamine. The dopamine, again, is that chemical that, again, makes people feel good. But at the same time, whenever you give an opportunity for someone to anticipate, make sure you follow through. And I use the classic example as if you ever ordered something online from eBay or Amazon or something like that, and you pay for it, and then you get the first email that comes through on your phone, and it's your order's being processed. We get a little hit of dopamine, and then your order is on its way. It's on the plane, and you get another little hit of dopamine, and then it's on the truck for delivery today. Another little hit of dopamine. But if it doesn't arrive on that day,
the world ends.
Exactly, that's right. It doesn't arrive, the world ends. So if you're going to allow people to anticipate, you need to be able to follow through. And the last one is make sure that you give people the opportunity to have a smile, or dare I say it, a little laugh, a little chuckle, because that's the last brain chemical, and that is endorphins. The releasing of endorphins, again, makes someone feel good. Now, if you can get that perfect mix together of serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, and endorphins together, meaning to remember, empathize, anticipate, and laugh, you're going to keep it real. There's my acronym. Mm-hmm. And you're going to ensure that the people that are going to go away from any interaction that they've had with you, whether it's en masse or one-on-one, remembering and actually having that stuff solidify in their own minds about what you've been talking about with them.
Shane, lastly, and normally this would be the first question you ask when you're talking to somebody about public speaking, but it's one of the greatest fears of humankind, getting up on a stage or in a church hall or a school P&C. Are there any simple tips to overcome that fear?
Practice.
Simple as that.
It's as simple as that. The more you practice that skill, the better you are at it. The more you speak, the more you speak. Those are the sort of things that I say. I mean, there are a number of things that I deal with clients and teach them all about pitch and phrasing and the pause and silence and all those sort of things. But at the end of the day, whoops, there we go. There's another cliche.
It just slipped in, just like that.
Just slipped in. There we go. Practice. It has to be the number one. Practice to the point where you don't have to worry. And that's why I go back to the notion of story, because you know your stories, because you know your background. You don't have to practice as much because you know that content. There's a very famous quote by Laurence Olivier, and he actually says that the performance does not begin until the lines are down. So, in other words, you will not be able to make your speech interesting, resounding, enthralling, people leaning in until you know that speech and you know it to the point that you can perform it.
And what about notes, Shane? Some people can work from notes, others need word for word. Is there a golden rule there? Another cliche?
I like to get people to a point where they don't have to rely on notes, whether that be a completely written out verbatim speech or even dot points. If there's a way of looking at it, you could have a story, a point, and then a transition. So this is my story. I tell that story because it's a great example of X, which means that we must do Y. And if you could follow that same little rule all the way through, tell a story, make a point, transition to your next story, point, and transition. You've got it all tied up in there. Notes, as I said, I try and if you really want to be a good orator, a good speech maker, you need to not be concerned about your notes. If you're going to make notes, I would be probably putting down no more. And for example, if you're giving, say, a 10-minute speech or something like that, no more than 2 to 3 points max that you can talk on.
Shane Mallory, I really appreciate your time on Ipswich Election Watch. I think there's some great tips there, not just for candidates, but for anybody having a listen. And of course, you are Ipswich's own Shane Mallory.
I am a local. Yes, I live in Brassel. So if anybody's interested or they need a hand, certainly, give me a yell and I'll be more than happy to help them out.
Thanks again. Now it's time to hear from a long-term resident of the city. Aileen Grading lives in Tivoli, which is in the new Division 4. Mrs. Grading is not shy about sharing her thoughts about council, past councillors, and the upcoming election. As a regular parishioner of St Mary's, I began asking had there been much talk about the election and what people are saying.
Oh, yes, they were all talking about it. We just feel like we've been terribly let down in the past and we're hoping for better with the new council.
Does anybody have any preference for candidates and mayors at this point, or is it still wide open?
I haven't heard anybody say they're interested in any of the candidates for mayor because I don't think any of them have got the necessary qualifications, and a lot of people feel like that.
But what about local councillors? I understand you're in Division 4.
I'm in Division 4. I've spoken to one, Kate Kunzelman, who's running, and she came to my house and had a cup of tea and she wrote down all my concerns. The others, one, Russell Milligan, you can't get in touch with. I can't get in touch with him because I'm not online, and he only has a email address. And the other two, well, I know one guy, but and then there's another one, I think, and I don't even know his name.
Well, what are the local issues for you, Aileen?
Oh, the issues for Tivoli is we're a forgotten suburb. Our roads are atrocious. I'm 5 minutes from the CBD. I don't have curbing and channeling. And not many streets in Tivoli have the appropriate cement, concrete curbing and channeling. Some of them have the bitumen. But, it's almost like we don't exist. And we're 5 minutes from the CBD. I've paid so much rates over the years for nothing.
So it's those grassroots issues that are going to decide or help decide your vote.
Oh, infrastructure. That's what I'm after.
What sort of infrastructure?
Decent roads, curbing and channeling. We need another bridge over the river because it sometimes takes 3 change of lights just to get into Brisbane Street. All of that has just been forgotten. We've just sailed along. We've allowed people to build all these houses all around the place, but they haven't addressed the infrastructure.
And what are you hearing from your friends at church? What are their issues?
Well, not so much at church, but my friends that I have quite a few friends, and most of them are saying that we're not getting money spent here. It's all being spent down at Springfield. I've had to grow the grass out to the bitumen because I'm on the side of the hill and it washes out to stop washouts and making the my street dangerous. I've had to grow the grass out to the gutter, and I've got a half-acre lot. Both I've 2 houses here. They're both half-acre lots, and we've got big footpaths, and I had to mow that until recently because I have to pay someone to do it now, but the council has never, in my 59 years of living in my house, mowed my footpath.
And what's been the response in the past, Aileen, when you've contacted previous councillors or council officers?
Well, one laughed in my face when I asked her for curbing and channeling. The last one I had was Wayne Went, I think, and I asked him, but I got nothing.
It is an issue across the city, the older suburbs, even the acreage lots at Carolee.
You know, I waited 43 years for sewage, and the only reason I got sewage now is because the government passed a law that you can't have septic on anything under 2.5 acres.
Aileen, if I can just ask you one more question. Looking outside your suburb, and you've made a passionate plea there for incoming councillors to look at infrastructure. What are some of the bigger citywide issues that you've been thinking about or discussing with friends?
Well, the parking in this city is pretty bad. You go up to the park, there's cars parked all around there. You couldn't go to the park for the day and get a car park. And all the streets where it's not metered, there's cars everywhere. You know, we need more car parks for people to park in. Well, I, for one, can't walk too far now. So, I like to park close to where I'm going if I'm going into the city.
Yes, exactly.
But I have to go to a solicitor tomorrow, so I have to get my daughter-in-law to just drop me and then come back.
Any other issues that are on your mind as we get closer to the election?
I'm hoping that the incoming councillors will make sure that the compliance officers in that city do their job. Because I've been putting in complaints for 8 years about someone running a business next to me, spray painting day and night. And I've been told that I have to police it by the compliance officers. And I politely told them I wasn't doing their job for them, that it was up to them. My health's been affected by it. I don't know what authority the councillors have, but I would hope that they would make sure that the council officers were looking after all the constituents, not just a few.
On that note, Aileen, I'd like to thank you so much for taking time to talk to me today on Ipswich Election Watch. And no doubt you'll be considering very seriously right up until election day who gets your vote for mayor and 2 local councillors for your division.
Yes, I certainly will.
Ipswich Election Watch.
In the next episode, what prompted council to get involved in the Ipswich CBD redevelopment? A closer look at issues beyond the CBD, and we'll hear from more Ipswich residents. Music on this podcast is courtesy of Purple Planet Music. You can follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn. This is Alan Roebuck. Thanks for listening.